Hi, everyone. This is Teresa Spangler, CEO of Plaza Bridge Group and your host of FutureForward. And today I'm really excited to bring Jaime Taets with me, joining me today to talk about lots of different things. But I love the fact that we're going to talk a little bit about cultural crisis internal to companies and organizations, as well as a whole lot of other points that I know you're very strong in, Jaime. But I did want to talk about your background a little bit. You're a public speaker and author, and as everyone can see, the culture climb in the back behind you there, that you're uniquely qualified to address these cultural crises internal to organizations, which we're going to dive into a little bit more. But you have over 20 years of corporate culture experience, 13 of which you've spent leading large-scale global transformations for companies like Cargill, very, very large, privately held and probably public companies. So I want to go ahead and start maybe kicking off a little bit about, tell me what cultural crisis looks like today. What are you seeing and experiencing? Why is this so important at this moment in time? It seems like everything is a crisis.
Right. So how much time do we have to talk about what we're seeing?
I know.
Right. So we talk a lot with our clients about, the three legs of the stool is that you've got to have, especially in this business climate, you've got to have a business strategy that can ebb and flow, right? And can be agile with kind of what's going on. You have to have leaders that can drive the change required to achieve that strategy. And you have to have a culture that has a strong enough foundation to withstand the change. So what we're seeing right now in the cultural crisis is, to me, not the lack of business strategy. I mean, clearly there's always work we can do there. We're seeing a lack of ability for leaders to drive change resilience, right, in these organizations. And we're actually building all of this on a culture that probably wasn't as strong as we thought it was. And so it's that shared crisis of like, we thought we were better than we were until we really had to change, right? Until things got hard or harder. And now a lot of organizations are struggling and they think it's something new, but it's really probably just cracks in the foundation that were there all along.
Right. So I mean, can we go back a little bit and say, well, what are those cracks in the foundation? How should leaders be looking at their organization today, and even maybe stress testing for this? Because I agree. I think, when things are good, you don't want to look under the covers or under the rug. So
Right.
what is it that we should be doing all the time to stress test?
Right. Well, the things that we're seeing, kind of the biggest cracks in the foundation, is a lack of investment in true leadership disciplines. And this is right. We should have done it 15 years ago, right? Which you see as well, I know. And now it's like we've got leaders that aren't capable. We haven't taught them the skills because people just don't naturally have these skills
Right.
to be able, right, to manage this. And we talk about culture being the leader's choice.
Right.
Yes, while you can manage a culture at the top of an organization, where you really impact culture is at the department, division, team level.
Yeah.
We haven't taught those leaders how to do that.
So development has always been an issue. I mean, especially when things get tight. And so what are there ways that companies can invest in development that don't look so overwhelming?
Yeah, there's a lot of free ways actually. And right, we're in this, we do this for a living. So as for me to say there are things you can do that you don't have to hire us and don't cost you. We talk about kind of this leadership learning in three different areas. Educate and train, which means send your leaders, read books, right? Put development plans in place, right? Bring in good people that you and I both know. There's some great trainers and some leadership development people out there. We do that as well. Educate and train is one thing, but that's where most companies stop.
Mhm.
They just bring in training.
Mhm.
And they don't model and mentor is the second step of kind of adult learning and what we see. And that's on the job. Like, what do we do after the training? Right?
Right.
Who's helping us and holding us accountable and helping us to do this work and to
Putting
truly
it to
evolve.
work, basically.
Because your muscle memory is going to go back to what you knew before
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you leave the training. And so you've got to do the model and mentor phase. And then the last phase is the validate and perform.
Yeah.
Are we ever coming back to these leaders and saying, you went to a change training 6 months ago. I see how you've been trying to incorporate it, right? I can see your proficiency, right? You've really helped us think differently about that. Are we ever coming back to the value realization of our leadership development?
Mhm.
And I think it's a gap in the leadership development industry as well, as we don't incorporate all of those pieces in, and we don't set companies up to truly shift and grow like they need to.
And I think you're bringing up this point because things have changed so dramatically, especially in the last 5 years, not just with COVID, but with technology and all the variables that are kind of coming at us today. How do you see leadership needing to change if there's just so many things they have to touch on that they didn't used to have to touch on?
Right. You're seeing the generational changes are driving a lot of
Yeah.
that as well, right? We
Yes.
can talk, that's a
Yeah.
whole nother episode that we could talk about at that. What we're seeing is leadership has to get more conscious. Is
Mhm.
the word we're using, right? Conscious leadership. And it's more around love, respect, right? Honesty and trust with our people, and less about, micromanaging, truly managing, hitting project deadlines. And we have to treat people more as humans, and what's happening that's good and bad. I mean, I think it's beautiful. I have 4 Gen Z kids at home.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing they're going to demand something differently,
Yeah.
right? Something different from these companies. And I'm actually not as worried right now as I am 5 and 10 years from now, because these Gen Z, they won't have to stay at a company that has a culture crisis
Right.
happening and has leaders that aren't doing this, but we've got to give them time to build these skills.
Yeah. And I think that's the generational side. It's really good. And we have multi-generational, and getting them to work together is probably a whole nother
First
layer.
time in history, we've had 4 full generations in the workforce. We haven't seen that. And I don't think most people realize that. There's
Yeah.
a lot of different values that we're trying to, right, to appeal to
Yeah.
keep them high performing.
Well, when I think, and these are conversations, so I don't have this to be truth or factual, but conversations I've had when I ask about what leaders stand out to people. It's Elon Musk. It's the big companies, and they don't always, not for their fault. I mean, they have great companies, but they don't always personify love and respect.
Correct.
So how do you balance that? Because they clearly are doing something right, but they're using different tactics and different styles of leadership, which sometimes can feel very harsh to people. So
Right.
how do you balance this? And what do you say to individuals that, and I get this from a lot of young people, I don't want to work for a company like that.
Right. And so the biggest thing about when I think we look at the Elon Musks and these it's because of their innovative approach, right? It's not necessarily, and I say that I don't think he's going to go down in history as the best leader.
Right.
I think he's the best innovator. And
Yes.
sometimes we mistake that these people that we see as uber successful probably have a lot of good leaders around them that have helped them build the organization, right? That are true leaders, meaning they care about the people
And that,
and servant leaders.
and I think that's one incredible point just to harp on, is that what is personified to the public is is marketing. It's media. It's generating eyeballs and all the things that these guys need and want to keep them in that spotlight. Again, not good, not bad. It's just what it is, right?
Right.
So separating that from what, as you're saying, they have good leaders. They must have good leaders around them. And so how would one step into a leadership role or be identified as a leader potentially in one of these companies?
Yeah, and I think it goes to what are your intrinsic motivations? Because what we see a lot, and I know you probably see this, is we take our best salesperson and we say they must be the sales manager.
Yeah. Yes.
And they're miserable. We see this all the time, that they're miserable and we're miserable because they're not the best leader,
Yeah.
right? They're the best at what they do. And you have to really examine your intrinsic motivations. And we've been talking with clients about there's also a hierarchical stigma to this, that the only way to move up in a company is to become a leader, right, of people. And what you're seeing some of our clients do, and some of the bigger companies are starting to realize this too, is you've got to create an individual contributor track for
Yeah.
really, really smart people that don't love managing people. And they can be we have clients that have like principal engineers that sit on their executive leadership team and have no direct reports. Right. So we have to break that stigma of it's only people that have direct reports that can be leaders, because leaders look a lot of different ways. But we have to allow the people that truly are driven by serving others. We have to put those people right into the true leadership roles.
Yeah. And how important are these aspects in terms of motivation and productivity and all the things yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the stats are there. So this is the beautiful thing for us is there has been more study on this in the last 7 to 10 years than we've had in the last 40 before that. And so there's so much data now that shows that, positive cultures outperform the S&P 500 by 4 to 5 times, right? The profitability of these companies, and that all stems with leaders.
Yeah.
Right? Creating those environments where we talk about culture being how you think, act, and interact
Yeah.
every day, right? And creating those positive, interactions is what's creating that positive result in the business.
Right. And, it's important to operate when I go into client work and bring my team in, the most important aspect we look at before we take an account is to understand their culture, because then we understand, is there fear of being innovative or creating new ideas and bringing them to the forefront and having those discussions and being open and honest, because innovation is all about this collaborative effort, and it's can be scary. And so you want to encourage those people to be able to step up and not fear, being shot down immediately with ideas or whatever steps they feel like they want to take. So I find it really interesting.
It is. Literally, how many hours ago this morning, I had this conversation with a CEO of a big logo that everybody would know, that we're going to start doing work with. And when he described his executive team, they're all super smart, right? And they've come from a lot of different areas and have really good educations. But culturally, what he was describing to me was a mismatch,
Yeah.
right? On innovation versus playing, like all the things. And I said to him, I said, I think your cultural vision is where we need to start. Are
Yeah.
we all on the same page on the culture? Because there's a lot of organizations that will use the innovation word
Right.
and they don't actually walk the walk. You see this all the time, right? And
Right.
they can use a lot of other words. It's not just innovation, but we say one thing, but
Right.
the culture doesn't actually show up in that same way. And it's because we haven't done the work at the leadership team to say, what is our vision for the culture, even if we're not there today?
And I think incentive, how are you measured is so important, because I know in other instances, especially when you're tightening the belt and you're looking at profitability more, that if you're incentivizing the cuts and the budget savings, you're not incentivizing ideation and creativity. And so you start to lose this real momentum on, okay, the next generation of product. And it's a balance, but there is a way to do it. And I'm sure you face that. Do you have strategies that you talk to around that?
Well, so some of this is just getting right really scrappy with as
Mhm.
leaders, right? Our job as a leader over whatever team I am managing and the leaders underneath me, my job is to get to the heart at the strengths in our organization, right? Are we utilizing the strengths of the people? I spoke at a conference a few months ago, 500 leaders in a room. And I talk about bridging the gap, right, between organizations and their employees and how that relationship looks different. And I said, how many of you have open positions you're trying to fill right now, right? To this group of 500. All 500 raised their hand.
Oh, wow.
And then my second question was, how many of you believe you have fully maximized the strengths and the performance of everybody on your team already? And maybe like 3 people out of 500 raised their hands. And I don't believe them either.
Yeah.
But the reason I bring that up is we're in this talent crisis, right? We're seeing like we need people, we can't hire people. Are we stopping to say, who do we have on our team? There could be a person that's 3 years out of school that's more innovative than I am,
So
that
agree.
should be playing that role. And so instead of looking at them as hierarchical or generational, or they've been here 15 years, so now they're qualified to do something. Are we leaning on the strengths? And so that's my first thing is start with, do you really understand the strengths of your people?
Yeah. And is there, do you get a sense of why that's not a first step? And what, I mean, and so it's a strategy, certainly. We've
Right.
talked about it a lot.
Right.
But why is it not a first step today? And how should leaders really start to shift that mindset?
Well, I think there's two root causes to it. There's probably more, but two that we see. The number one is we don't give leaders time to lead.
Yeah.
A
Okay.
lot of them are working leaders, right?
Yes.
We're giving them,
That's a
we're putting
really
so
good
much
point.
on their plate and we're deprioritizing the care and love for the people, right? As when they have time.
Yeah.
So we're asking a lot of leaders. So in all fairness, it comes from both sides. And the other thing is we're not giving them the tools to have those types of conversations.
Yeah.
Right? I do feel in a lot of organizations, we're still dealing with like the HR years of like, we can't ask someone if they have kids, we can't
Mhm.
ask them what their hobbies are or what they did on the weekend. That's gone.
Yeah.
Right? Like we went into everyone, COVID happened, we came into everybody's living room with their kids running around behind them. Like the line is no longer there where it used to be. And I think there's a lot of leaders who grew up in I can't have these kind of vulnerable conversations with people about what they want and what they need. And I think we have to get rid of that belief because it's changed and we have to be able to have those conversations.
So you clearly can see the passion that you have for this topic. Tell me, where did that come from? And so many people want to have a passion for their work. How do you motivate yourself every day? So where did it come from? And how do you stay motivated to keep wanting to influence change?
Right. So let me be clear. And as an entrepreneur, I don't get up every day and think this is, it's hard. And it's
Yeah.
hard right now too, right? So I don't want this to be a highlight reel.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing for me is I stay true to who I am and I'm very honest about who I'm not
Yeah.
or who I'm not for, right?
Yeah.
And that can be in this conversation this morning. It's like I'm just super transparent. And here's what I believe, and here's what I've seen, and here's how I can help because I go in search of impact
Mhm.
instead of revenue or results. Because
Yeah.
I know by searching for impact, I can do that. So I think we have a deficit of not just leaders. I think we have a deficit of humans that know
Mhm.
their true purpose.
Yeah.
Because
I
when you
agree.
know your purpose, you can still make mistakes. You're still going to fall on your face every now and then, but I can always come back to there's something that I'm rooted deeply in that's not going to knock me, off course forever, right? I can come back to it. And I think that's what drives me is I know my purpose and I know there's going to be 100 people that listen to this and none of them are ever going to become clients for my business and I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because if I can get one person to have a different conversation or maybe change the way they think or, challenge their beliefs a little bit, that's what matters. So I think it's just knowing what that is.
Yeah. So where did that seed come from? Because you must have gotten
It's
that
been
early
years
on.
and years of searching and years of finding out that that wasn't what it was. Right.
No.
So my corporate days were full, and I was just having this discussion with somebody too, is they were full of like me striving for the next challenge, right? So every 18 months I would get a new challenge, I'd get a new role, I'd be promoted.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't until about 10 years into my career that I started going, I'm getting promoted, but do I even love the direction that I'm moving? Right?
Yeah.
I can fix issues and I can come in and build teams, but is this what I want to do? And
Yeah.
it was that question of like going inside and saying, I got to figure out what's most important to me.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to fix our culture issue.
Yeah.
If
I
leaders can do that and are given the space and the skills to be able to do that, they're going to be better leaders for anybody underneath them.
Well, and no, do you believe that the leaders should also be doing this with their teams and their staff and helping them find that because they're going to be more indebted to want to be putting
One of
themselves.
our most popular workshops that we get asked for the most in the last 18 months is personal why workshops.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
we do business, corporate, like what is our why, right? What's our purpose? How do we go to market? Like those
Yeah.
types of things. But personal wise, where leaders and their teams can go through like you're here, you work for us, but your why might be satisfied in a different way.
Right.
Right. And that's what's gonna create a sense of belonging and it's what's gonna keep you here.
Yeah.
So it's the non-traditional things we're seeing that are actually working to
Yeah.
help cultures improve.
All right. So what were you like as a kid? Where did you play? What was your big
Oh my
passions then?
Yeah. So I was always outside and always dirty. I was very much a tomboy.
Okay.
So I was the first, the only girl in the neighborhood that had a Batman big wheel, right? Because the boys had the Batman big wheels and I didn't want the pink one. Yeah, right. It's just I was always kind of that way. But what I realized later in life is I've always had a high degree of empathy,
Mhm.
right? It's on my strengths finder, right? It's one of those things. And I think it's part of who I am as a leader as well, and as a business owner. But that empathy is something that I've carried through my entire life, right? I was always the ear that somebody, when they were having an issue or they were struggling with something, they wanted to talk through it with me.
Yeah.
So I think of myself as a curious sponge. Like, I love talking to people. I love listening to podcasts like what you're doing, because it just makes me smarter and
Yeah,
gives me more things that I can share with others who are struggling.
sure.
Right. So I've kind of always seen that in myself.
So did you have a parent or someone that inspired you as a young person?
Yeah, my mom did actually. My mom, a lot of people don't know the story, but my mom had me, she got pregnant at 16
Oh,
in
wow.
small town, Minnesota,
Oh,
right? Back in the
yeah.
70s,
Yeah, that's about
which is what, was not an easy road back in those
right.
days.
I
Not that
bet.
it's easier now, but it's like the social stigma of
Yeah.
that. And my mom and I ended up moving. And so it was just her and I. And she put herself through night school, right? Taking care of me, worked a full-time job. And started her own business actually. So quite
Yeah.
a few years into that, she actually started her own business and still owns her own business. And so I've got that example of just like how society wants to tell you this is how your life is supposed to be based on the circumstances, and how you really have control to say that doesn't have to be my story.
And I think that's so important for especially young professionals today, because I do talk and mentor a lot of young professionals, and I think they sometimes feel deflated and defeated, and feeling like if I put myself out there, it just doesn't go anywhere. What do you share with them to help them kind of overcome barriers, real or imagined? I mean, perception can become reality, right?
Right. Well, not the culture climb, but before that, I wrote a whole book on this as well, because I believe this feeling of being stuck, right?
Hmm.
Stuck can manifest in a lot of different ways, but it's this feeling of like I should be doing something else, or I don't know what to do next, right? There's a lot of different ways that stuck shows up, but it stems from fear. That feeling of being stuck, right, is our catalyst for change.
Right.
But we have to first examine, where is it coming from? So for a lot of us, and our mutual friend Teresa talks about imposter syndrome, right?
Yes.
Not believing that we deserve it, whether that's a healthy relationship or it's that job promotion, right? Whatever that is. And I think there's a lot of people that live in that don't believe they deserve the thing, right? It's the imposter syndrome. I also think we have to be very careful. The advice I give my kids is be careful who you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
Because
I
if
do.
I want to do different things or big things or something that society would say that's not what you're supposed to be doing at this age, or yeah, with that background, if I'm only around people that believe that same thing, that's what I'm going to believe.
Right,
And
right.
we don't realize that we're given a lot of beliefs that we don't
Yeah.
have to carry with us.
Well, so that brings me to the big question of how AI is influencing and where leadership goes in this world of AI and, conversational chat applications and all the tools that we have at our hands.
Right.
How do you put that in perspective, for your clientele?
Yeah. So I put it in perspective of the way we were talking 10 years ago around automation, right? In the manufacturing space. And if you remember, we went through this where everyone was fearful they were going to lose their jobs when we started automating manufacturing machines, right? We didn't need the humans to push the button. The machine kind of does it.
Yeah,
We went through that curve and we didn't lose many jobs from automation, right? I hope, is going to be a similar curve, because what it allowed us to do, and we have a lot of manufacturing clients, so we've seen this over the years, is it allows us to upskill and use the brains of the people for better things, for bigger things. My hope is we control AI, right, to a point where it doesn't do it for us. It just helps us use our brain power in a higher level thinking,
yeah,
right? It maybe gets us started faster. I
right.
was talking to somebody, and I've looked at it. I'm not fully in, right? But I'm kind of dabbling in it to say, like, okay, I want to think about generational change, and I want to do a talk on generational change, or I want to write a blog.
Yeah,
If I type in, right, what are the biggest successes in generational change to AI? It can get me thinking. Not that I'm going to take that content and use it. I'm going to use it to like stimulate my thinking so that
right,
I have a better perspective on whatever it is I want to say.
right.
So I think it's how we use some of this technology to propel us forward instead of do it for us. We still have to be the ones growing.
I totally agree. I think it brings me to kind of the next topic is this ability for complex thinking and not taking everything out there at face value without doing your own research and testing. Even, we're being told every day AI may deliver, ChatGPT may deliver you great information, but you have to check it. And
Yes.
so we should be fact checking lots of different articles and stories that are coming out.
Right.
So what is your, I guess, experience in, or maybe what do you see the development of comprehensive thinking, deep thinking in these leaders today?
I think it's a muscle we haven't asked them to exercise much, right? So we talk to our clients a lot about back to the way adults learn is the
Right.
educate and train is great, but the model and mentor really comes from creating space for these
Yeah,
kind of conversations to happen, right? For them to think in the way that you and your team would come in and help them think. We have to be deliberate about building that muscle for them because otherwise, what are we going to do? We're going to lean on, if our muscle is weak, we're going to lean on something else,
right.
right? Kind of prop it up. And so I think we've got to develop enterprise thinking, more
Yeah,
enterprise thinking instead of siloed thinking.
yeah,
We've got to develop our growth mindset. So I think there's a lot of leaders stuck in, we've tried that in the past, it doesn't work, or stuck in fear of something new because
right.
past something new changed our world. But now that we look back on it, it was for the better, right? So it's all of that change management and growth mindset. How are we teaching our leaders how to have that?
And
Because
what
they're
do you,
gonna model that in the organization.
so I guess in alignment, what do you see the senior executives, what are their biggest concerns that they're expressing to you when you go in? They must sense something needs to be, could be improved.
Yeah. My concern is they still don't see the deep roots, right? So we
Yeah.
have an analogy called stop mowing dandelions.
Huh?
And so when we're busy, and this is just to the exact same thing I said about leaders, is they don't even have the time to think right now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They're reacting. And so
Yeah.
when we react, we cut the dandelion off at the grass. So it doesn't solve the issue, it just solves it for today.
Yeah.
And 3 weeks from now, we have the same issue again, and it's probably produced other issues. And so we just live in this firefighting mode.
Yeah.
So what I see that is, I think is an epidemic right now is leaders who are just in firefighting and have no idea how to get out of that because they're not creating the space to
Oh,
critical.
and haven't we been in this firefighting mode for a number of years now? I mean, I think in technology, my background, it always felt like firefighting. It's like one thing after another, and you really had to stop. You had to stop to make sure you were putting the future in front of you to put time and energy into it. Otherwise, you would never get there.
When we just had this a couple weeks ago and a new executive team, right? They come together and they have meetings every week together, right?
Mhm.
But the work we're doing with them is similar to you. We're forcing them, we're asking different questions because they're
Yeah.
on autopilot.
Yeah.
We're forcing them to think differently. And when they get done, I mean, they're like, this was like a therapy session,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
That's
Because it's forced them to like examine things in a different way. And
right.
but it's re-energizing because
Well,
they're like, I feel it again, right? My passion maybe is coming back that's been kind of stifled.
right. And it seems like I think people want these conversations. We just haven't developed the skills to have these kinds of conversations. And maybe that in the generationals, I mean, some maybe of the more experienced professionals that have been out there for, quite some time, I don't know, 45, 50, they grew up that way, but we've stopped having it. But then you've got a younger generation that's grown up with, whatever, you can get in an instant.
Collaborative thinking, right?
Yeah,
And like
yeah,
some
yeah,
of these things that we're teaching them where
right,
they don't, just do it themselves. They're very collaborative and team focused. And I
right,
think that's a big culture shift that is happening for a lot of organizations.
yeah. And so, is there a certain thing that you look for in the company that says they're open to having these changes? I mean, can you tell when you go in, or is it systemic enough that everybody's looking at this as an issue and addressing it?
Everyone is not looking at it. Everyone might be saying they're looking at it. I would say over the last almost 10 years of having this business, my
Yeah.
radar has gotten better and better, right? The analogy. So, I joke about our sales process is almost sometimes trying to sell people out of what we do because it's going to require change.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
have to be ready for it. And we give the analogy that you don't hire a personal trainer to give you a bowl of ice cream in the remote,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And you don't hire someone like you or someone like us to come in and just think the way you've done it is the way you should continue doing it. You hire us to shift your perspective,
and
right?
I just can't imagine anyone today not sitting there and I sit in my seat because everybody I'm working with, I'm surrounding myself with people that are trying to shift their perspective. But it's hard to imagine not understanding that it's a need, it's a necessity because the speed in which things are moving with technology and everything, not, and forget the economy, but,
Right.
to sustain and build that resilience inside.
If it's being slowed right now, right? People that aren't reacting to it, like you're saying, it's because there's other factors they can blame it on
Yeah.
because they're not looking at the root,
Right,
right? COVID was the excuse, the economy is the excuse, but when we peel it all back, there's other things that you do control,
right.
right? So we're helping them understand like there are things we don't control. Understand that's always going to be the case in business. What are the things that we do control? And
Yeah,
when you start having those conversations, it's actually freeing for leaders because they were living in a world of like, we don't, it happens to us.
yeah, yeah,
Now you're like, wait a minute, we can actually do something about this, right? It creates a different energy in the culture and in the organization.
so share a little bit about any barriers that you faced actually creating the success. I mean, you have a number of books, you are speaking, you've created quite a bit of success for yourself. So what sort of, s I guess, inspiration would you give young people that wanna get out and find their passion and do something on their own?
Right. So the first thing is it doesn't all happen in a day or a week or a year, right? You don't want it all right now.
Yeah,
I think that was a lesson I learned early, and it was probably because I was raised that I didn't have it all,
yeah,
right? And I was around a lot of people that had what I perceived as more than me. And my mom used to say, "But if you have it all now, what do you have to look forward to?"
good point. Yeah,
So it's just that framework of like all the success isn't going to come. Like start listening to other people's stories, right? I wrote my first book because I wanted to share like, I started my business and 6 months later was in the middle of a divorce with
mm,
no safety net financially,
right,
right? So the most successful people have been through hard things.
yes, and
We only hear the highlight reel, but
important.
the story underneath is
Yeah,
blood, sweat, and a lot of tears likely. And so you have to go through that, right? It's so I now use a tool. It's a very simple question, but when something is happening, as I say, what's this preparing me for? Right?
okay, that's
Must be a
great.
reason this obstacle is here. This thing I don't know how to figure out, right, is keeping me stuck right now. But what's it preparing me for? And
Yeah,
it's almost a question of faith
yeah,
that there is something better that you're working towards, but you have to build the muscle that you need. And so I think we have a mental health, dilemma right now because when people hit obstacles, they think there's something wrong with them.
I so
It's
agree, and I hear this all the time. Right,
nothing
it's
wrong with
always yeah. I mean, I
them.
just a solid point to you, that it's, "What am I not doing right?" Well, that has nothing to do with it.
Right. And even that question, science would prove, keeps you in a stuck state. It's the
Yeah,
wrong question,
yeah,
right? What am I doing right? What could I do different, right? Is a totally different mindset in how you question and ask yourself and get out of those stuck points. But I heard a great quote, and I'm not going to get it exact, but I think about it almost every day is reframing and saying, what if the obstacles in my path are actually my path?
mm, oh, that's
So instead of
excellent.
seeing them as all these
Yeah,
obstacles, what if they
yeah,
are the path?
yeah,
Because it's the only way you're going to know and learn that thing you need to have to get that next opportunity.
and it just so puts it to point to stay in the day right there where you are is where you are. But, you're figuring out how to overcome those obstacles, and that's part of the path.
And don't get hung up and say, I don't believe in luck.
Yeah,
I believe in preparation meeting opportunity,
yeah,
right? And so you see people, you can look at me and think I'm lucky, there hasn't, I don't believe, like, okay, maybe I met somebody at an event, but I still think I did the work to
Yeah,
know what I wanted to do at that event, why I needed to meet that person, right? Whatever it is. So focus on preparation
yeah,
so that when the opportunity happens, you can appear lucky, right? And it can feel like luck is happening to you. But I think we sit and think that other things are happening to other people,
right.
and we're not, we create our own luck, is my
So what do
belief.
you do for your own mental health? Are you a journaler? Do you do yoga? What things do you do to take care of yourself?
Yeah, I try to journal. I'm not very good at it. I know it helps. So when I do it, I appreciate it, but I don't do it as often as I need to. So I meditate every single day.
Yeah,
I work out, I move my body, and it might be 10 or 15 minutes some days, right? If I've got a flight or right, don't have time, I could stand up in my office and do squats just to do something. But I feel like when you move your body,
yeah,
it changes your brain. I mean, they studies show, right? It changes the chemicals in your brain. So I think moving your body, even it doesn't have to be crazy movement.
yeah.
I meditate. I actually have a pretty set morning routine and a pretty set evening routine.
Okay.
I take 30 minutes at the end of every day by myself. Like my whole family knows I'm going upstairs. I have a whole routine I go through. I do affirmations, I do reading, and it reinforces, right? It allows me to kind of wind down instead of going into bed
Yeah,
carrying all of the drama and the noise that I've heard all day long.
I think that's
Um,
very healthy.
and I
Yeah,
get 7.5 hours of sleep every night.
yeah.
I
So
do not sacrifice my sleep.
well, I think that's excellent because it's so important and we all know it, but I think so many people struggle with sleep. But I think that evening routine that you have would be helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah. And it's different. You do what feels right to you,
Yeah,
right? But it's having that set routine. And once, they say what 21 days makes a habit.
yeah,
Now I can't even go up to my bedroom without being like, okay, I got to do that. And then I do this thing and then I sit and do this. And like, it's just part of my day.
right.
Right. So you got to get over that few weeks of like, this feels awkward, or I don't know if you've got to start, but you
Right.
have to have the mental health built into your routine.
I agree. Well, so what's next for you? You've got how many books? Tell me all your books.
So yeah, so the first book, You Are Here,
Yeah.
released in 2021. So this is the personal development one. It's really my stories of being stuck and how I overcame it and
Oh,
the things
awesome. Yeah.
still help me to this day. The Culture Climb actually releases in June of 2023.
Okay.
We're getting close to that release nationally, and that's about the model and how we work with clients and just how to think about culture and
Yeah.
simplify it. And then the third book, titled To Be Determined, is underway, that is around the leadership evolution, right?
Uh,
And what's happening in leadership,
yeah.
because I want to change the dialogue about that and make it approachable,
Yeah.
yet make it important,
Yeah.
more important than it is today. So that's what's ahead. And then, employees and 4 kids to get through college and everything else that goes along with that.
It's just that's amazing to me for kids to get through college.
Yep.
That by itself could, you just need to take
That's
that time every
why
night.
I have to meditate.
That's exactly right. Well, this has been a pleasure. Is there anything you want to share that we haven't talked about?
No, I just appreciate you and I appreciate this conversation because I believe that the more we can be vulnerable and talk about, right, these types of things, I think it creates a space for other people to
I,
feel normal when they're feeling this way.
myself included, and if anything, it's like how to ask questions and be the conversational again, and it's all part of, I think, leadership and collaboration on ideation, and just trying to innovate and building your own self resilience, which is really
Yep.
important.
Yep.
So I
Yes.
thank you. I think you're doing wonderful work. I
Thank
appreciate it. So keep us posted.
Will do.
We'll make sure that everyone gets links to the books and a little bit more about you when we post and make this live for everyone. So
Perfect.
thank you, Jamie. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you too.